Hello, so this is part 2 of the Favilla Fixer-Upper, and I'm going to start with an apology. I did the part 1 over a year ago, and I was going to try to bring you with me as I worked on this thing, and things kind of went awry, and I kind of got to a point where I couldn't progress anymore as far as fixing this guy up, and kind of forgot about doing a part 2. Then the other, I don't know, a week ago or so, I noticed that the first part had something like 89 views, and while that's not a lot of views by YouTube standards, still I figured that's a lot of people wondering, well, what the hell happened. So I apologize for making you wait this long for the update, and I hope it's worth your wait. And here I have the Favilla classical guitar that I bought in very bad condition. And I'm going to go through some of the things that I fixed on it and some of the things that it turned out I couldn't fix on it. I'll start with the cracks. Had like a hairline crack where the two bookends meet. I did get some CA glue in there and got that looking fairly good. You can still see that it's separated, but it shouldn't separate anymore. I should have dusted this. Now I'm embarrassed. So, hold on. Alright, that's better. Alright, that's better. So I did that, and this crack was really nasty. I don't know if that's going to focus in there, but I might put a picture in there for some of these things. But this was like the inside part was like hanging over this outside slice here. The crack goes all the way across. It was really bad up here, and these classical guitars have thin bodies. It was tricky getting in there and trying to line those up. It's still not as they're still not as lined up as I would like. There's still a bit of a, you can feel kind of a hump here. But I did the best I could, and I cleated it, or I believe that's the right, yeah. I put two small cleats, one down here and one out there, because of the fan bracing. These 2 points were the only place that you could really fit a cleat in there. Now I've been told later on, and I'll get to that part of the story, I took it to some people to have some other things worked on, and one of them said the cleats were a little overly robust, which is a fancy way of saying they were too thick. I thought they were pretty thin, but I've never done this before, so I mean, they couldn't have been, maybe an eighth thick. No, probably not. Probably more like a 16th. I don't know. But given that, I don't feel too bad about it, because I couldn't, what really wanted to do was put one in the middle of this crack, but there's because of the fan bracing, there's a brace that goes right there. It just couldn't be done. So I feel confident that this is not gonna come undone. I did put a little brace cleat back here for this crack, which looked like it had been patched or glued shut, but I was afraid that it might open up again. So there's a cleat up there. I don't know if you can see the light, on here is not great. I'll probably do some pictures and overlay them in editing. But there are sections where the wood on the top was completely worn off. Along this crack here, along this smaller crack, and up here down through this crack here. This guitar at some point suffered some water damage, which is more evidenced on the bottom, which I think you can see there. You can't see that fogginess down here. That's water damage. And there's a very small area here where there's like a split, like the two side pieces are starting to come apart. More on that later. So anyway, I fixed the crack. I did not try to really match the finish that is on here. I didn't think probably wouldn't be able to do it exactly anyway, and I didn't want to put a bunch of finish on there in case someone in the future wanted to actually refinish this thing properly. So I really just put enough finish stain on it to make it less jarring, so it didn't really jump out at you. It still kind of does, but it's better than bare wood. And I put a thin coat of semi-gloss poly on it to protect the wood. But this thing, between it both had water damage and it was extremely dried out. There are certain tricks that I use to rehydrate it, nothing fancy, like you get a little piece of Tupperware or something, put a rag or a sponge in it and set it down in the body, cover up the hole, and leave it, there until it's dried out, and then fill it up again and repeat the process until you think you've done as much as you can. But anyway, this thing was so dry that this rosette here, which I'm pretty sure is mahogany, was so dry you couldn't even see it. I mean, it was indistinguishable from the rest of the surrounding wood. It was pale. It was like dry to the touch. I mean, it was bad. It wasn't until I started putting some lemon oil on it to kind of clean, in the cleaning process, that I said, oh, realized that the rosette was there and it could be rehabilitated. And what I used was, to really get it to come back, was linseed oil, which is pretty heavy stuff. I mean, that's something that I only use if you've got like there's some, like one of my ukuleles, for whatever reason, it's a great ukulele, but the fretboard is dry. It always has been, and so every time I change strings, I'll put some linseed oil on there because I know it'll suck it in. If you put it on a fretboard that's in decent shape, it's going to take forever to dry. It it's a lot different than, say, lemon oil or whatever. Anyway, so, but it took numerous, I mean, I lost track of how many times I would put linseed oil on this, let it sit for a day or two, come back, put more on it. It just kept drinking it and drinking it. But it did bring it back. You can really see it now. I think in that first video I'd already started that process and you could see it a little bit, but I'm telling you, when I first got that thing, it was like it wasn't there at all. That's how dry this thing was. So I did that. I did make an attempt to glue back part of the binding which had come off over here. And I remember making disparaging remarks about somebody tried to do the same thing over here and they messed it up and there's like glue everywhere. And I apologize to that person because I didn't have much better luck. The trick you do is you heat up the, it's basically plastic binding on a lot of these, and that's what this is. You heat it up and to where it's flexible, with like a hair dryer, something like that. I think I heated it up too much because it kind of did not stick the way it should. It's attached sort of, but it's not, and the glue that got overheated kind of expanded, and it's not good. It had, pretty much the binding is shrunk to the point where it was still going to look not right anyway. But so that's a fail. So anyway, after fixing the crack and everything, I put strings on it, tuned it up. The tuners are in fairly good shape. They work really well. The ones on the bass side kind of make a creaking, popping noise when you move it, despite I put some oil on there and that helps it a little bit, but it still doesn't sound great. But they work once they dialed in. It works pretty well, and as you heard on that first clip, it sounds pretty good. The action is nice and low, which is unusual sometimes for classical guitars. If you go into a store, most of the guitars you're going to try out, even the higher end brands, they have really high action, and I think that's on purpose because of certain style of play. People who have a certain style of play, they want that high action, and it's not that hard of a thing to bring down. It's easier to bring the action down than bring it up on an acoustic instrument. But it's a player. It's pretty. Sounds pretty. Still looks like a wreck, but so I string it up and it's starting to settle in, and I'm like, oh, this sounds good. And then all of a sudden on the B string there's like a rattling sound. I'm like, what is going on there? And it was after it had been up to tension for maybe a week, and I started tapping around on it, and I'm like, oh, there's a brace loose. And so I poked around a little bit. I've got a little endoscope camera that I can send down in there and look at stuff. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be able to fix this. I'm not going to be able to take this off and put it back on and do it right. So I reached out to a luthier bandmate of mine, always recommends. And, you know, I gave it to him and told him what was going on. He's like, okay, I'll take a look at it. And you know, he called back and he's like, oh, wow, you know, um, this water damage and this stuff on the end, that's a big problem. You know, that's a huge deal to fix. And you know, and I was like, well, just put the brace back on. I'll figure out whether I want to spend more money on it, etc., etc. And he had it for a little while later, and then he was like, you know, I can't fix this. My tools won't work because the body is too thin. He said even for a classical guitar, the body of this is thinner than normal, which I hadn't thought of, but I should. It's about 4 inches. It doesn't seem like that would be outrageous. It's a little more than 4 inches. But okay, and he recommended a music store that kind of specializes in vintage instruments. All right. So I take it up to them, and it's kind of the same thing. They're like, oh my gosh, you know. Well, actually, they looked into it, and he said, oh, they looked in the inside, and he was like, oh, it's not loose. One of the braces has a crack in it, and you know, that shouldn't be too hard. So, you know, left with my contact information. A week or two go by, I call them up and say, hey, have you had a chance to do that yet? And they call back and said, oh my gosh, you've got this thing going on at the end. And I'm like, yeah, I know. You know, it's like that would be like, you know, super expensive, and, you know, and we're afraid that, you know, over time it's going to get worse. And I'm like, well, let's just fix the brace and we'll go from there. And then I'll be able to, you know, see how it sounds, etc., etc. A couple days later, they call and say, we can't fix it. Our tools won't fit in here. I don't know. You know, I know what they're talking about. I think I have the tool. There's a tool that StewMac sells for gluing braces. And apparently it won't, you know, it's adjustable, but it won't get small enough. Now, there are other ways to do it. I've seen, you know, you can do it differently. It's not unfixable. It's just more, they would have to make a special tool or fabricate something. And I guess they just didn't want to do it. So I got it back, and all I did was, I said, I can't really fix this myself. So I just put some glue and tried to, you know, put it in that crack on the brace and let it sit for a few days. It seems to have worked, really. I haven't heard that buzz again. I'm sure it'll come back at some point, but so it plays. It's a decent sounding instrument. So, but there is this factor of the end, which, you know, and they said you might, you know, play it at a lower, you know, drop D or something, so there's not as much tension. That's not something I'm going to do. But what I have done is when I'm done playing with it, most of the time I will detune it. But, you know, I don't play it that often. I play steel string a lot more often, or until recently almost exclusively steel string guitar. I would get it out and plink around with it. You know, I might break it out on a Friday and put it away Sunday. And when I put it up, I detune it. Just tune it way down so it's not just sitting with tension on it. And that seems to kept it from like flying apart. In the long term, it is an issue. To have that fixed would be astronomically expensive. I mean, they pretty much have to take the sides, almost like take the sides off, but pretty much take the guitar apart and put it back together. It's kind of insane. And I asked about fixing the binding and replacing the binding, and they said that would be like super expensive because they would have to, since there's all this glue in there, they would have to route it out, and I don't know, they quoted something like $1,000, and I was like, well, no thank you. So what I'm left with is a guitar that's better than it was. It is a nice playing instrument, but really isn't. It's almost like it needs somebody to take care of it, somebody to finish the job. So over the past few months, I've gotten more into playing nylon, sort of pseudo-classical stuff, and to where I was playing this a lot more, and I realized that I didn't, I'm probably putting more wear and tear on this than it can handle. So I've bought a second-hand Cordova classical guitar with a solid cedar top, and I wanted a little, because I wanted a little brighter sound, so I got a guitar with the cedar top, and it's very nice. So I'm playing that classical guitar for the most part. Every month or so I'll dig this guy out and play it a little bit. A couple of notes on this guitar is a little bit different than a lot of the classical guitars that I looked at when I was trying to figure out which one I wanted to buy. This neck is really wide. It's a little tricky to play for me. The nut is like 2 1/8 inches wide. The string spacing is like 1 3/4. So it's a little wider than a lot of the classical guitars that you'll find. And so it makes it a little tricky to play. And the newer one I got is probably a little smaller than average, narrower than average classical guitar, which has its advantages. With the things that I learn on that guitar, I can more easily transfer to steel string if I want to. But anyway, this is a big roundabout way of saying I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this guitar. Part of me just wants to keep it because it's cool. I do like the sound of it. It's nice to play it every once in a while. But another part of me wants to sell it to someone who can really, really fix it up. I don't think taking this thing apart and re-gluing it is a feasible operation. And honestly, I haven't really seen any change to it. Despite using it off and on, playing it off and on for a year. But it would be nice if somebody could actually replace the binding, do a proper refinish of the top, because this is a really nice guitar. I feel like I've taken it as far as I can. So I'm not really sure what I should do. Yeah, so, and then there's the fact that since it's pretty much still, even though it plays well and it sounds nice. It's a fixer-upper. If I'm selling it, I'm selling it as a, you know, as a project, which means it's not really going to bring, you know, I'll be lucky to get what I paid for it, which is fine, I guess. But I don't know. What should I do? I'm going to ask you, should I just keep this thing? Should I try to sell it to somebody who might bring it back to its former glory? Or should I just shut up and end this video? Okay, so there it is. Rambling aside. Again, I apologize for taking so long to give you an update on this. I'm going to end this video with a little musical piece that I've come up with as kind of a companion piece to a song that I wrote. And it's called Forgiveness. So, goodbye, and I'll see you next time.